My name is Olivia Grant, and from the outside, my life seemed perfect. I was a social worker in Vancouver, doing work that I loved, helping others navigate life's challenges. I was married to Ethan, a supportive and loving husband, and together we had 2 children, Lily and Jack. They filled our home with joy and laughter. Our neighborhood in Mount Pleasant was quiet and peaceful, the kind of place you'd imagine raising a family. I thought I had it all: a fulfilling career, a loving family, and a deep sense of faith. Everything about my life looked steady, secure, and happy. But what no one knew, or what I never told anyone, was that beneath the surface I was struggling with something that I had kept hidden for years. It was something I told myself didn't matter, something I believed was harmless. But deep down I knew it wasn't. I had been dealing with the shame of it for as long as I could remember as my secret battle with masturbation. I had always convinced myself that it was nothing to worry about. It was a private matter, something that didn't hurt anyone else. It didn't affect my relationship with Ethan, and it didn't interfere with my work. I told myself it was just an occasional release, a way to unwind after a long day. I told myself it was nothing more than that. But even though I repeated these excuses to myself, there was always a voice in my head, a whisper of doubt that reminded me it wasn't as harmless as I made it out to be. The truth was, I had been carrying this secret shame for years. I couldn't bring myself to share it with anyone, not Ethan, not my friends, not even my pastor. I was so afraid of being judged, of being misunderstood. How could I explain to someone that I had this battle inside of me that I couldn't seem to win? How could I show anyone that I, the woman who had it all together, was secretly struggling with something so private? The guilt weighed on me. Every time I gave in, every time I indulged in the act, I felt further and further away from the person I wanted to be. But I kept pushing it aside, thinking it was just a personal issue, something I could control. On the outside, everything looked perfect. I prayed every day, attended church, and tried my best to be a good wife, a good mother, and a good person. I was committed to my faith, and I truly believed in God's love and grace. But somehow this hidden sin kept me from feeling as close to God as I once had. It was like there was a barrier between us, one I couldn't overcome, no matter how hard I tried. I didn't know how to face it. I didn't even know how to bring it to light. I thought I was managing it, controlling it even. I believed that no one needed to know about it because it didn't affect my life in any visible way. But the truth was, it was affecting me more than I realized. The guilt built up each time I kept it hidden, each time I fell into the temptation, and each time I told myself it didn't matter. I couldn't escape the nagging feeling that maybe it was worse than I was letting on. Every time I indulged in it, it felt like a small part of me was breaking away from the person I was trying to be. I felt like a fraud. How could I claim to be living a righteous life while holding on to something so secret? I didn't want to admit it to myself, but deep down I knew something had to change. How could I reconcile my faith with this secret sin? How could I be the example I wanted to be for my children when I was hiding this from them? I loved my family so much, and I wanted to set the best example for Lily and Jack. I wanted them to grow up seeing their mother as a woman of integrity, a woman who lived according to her values. But how could I be that person when I had this hidden shame that I refused to confront? There were moments when I questioned whether this really was a sin, whether it was as bad as I felt it was. I tried to convince myself that it wasn't a big deal, that it didn't hurt anyone, that it didn't affect my relationship with Ethan or my children. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was more than just a private issue. It was spiritual too. I was distancing myself from God every time I indulged. I felt it, even if I didn't understand how or why. And yet, no matter how hard I tried to ignore it, no matter how much I told myself it was under control, it was always there, lurking in the back of my mind, making me feel less than I should be. I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know where to turn. But I kept on living my life, pretending everything was okay, all the while carrying the weight of this secret with me. I had convinced myself that it didn't matter. It was just a part of who I was, I told myself. But somewhere inside, I knew it was eating away at me. I felt like I was living a double life. I was a wife, a mother, a social worker, and a woman of faith. But I was also someone hiding a secret, someone who couldn't let go of a sin that kept me from fully living out the life I believed I should. It felt like I was stuck, trapped in a cycle I couldn't break. And no matter how much I tried to push it aside, the weight of it only seemed to grow heavier. In the quiet moments when the house was still and the children were asleep, I found myself reflecting on this secret. What would happen if I finally faced it? What would happen if I admitted the truth? Would it change everything? Or would it tear apart the life I had worked so hard to build? I didn't know the answers to these questions, but one thing was certain: I couldn't keep living this way. I didn't want to. I was ready for something to change, but I didn't know how. Then this life-changing day began just as normal. It had been one of those days, long, draining, and full of challenges. I had worked through countless client meetings, trying my best to help others navigate their struggles. By the time the evening came, I was utterly exhausted. As a social worker, my days often demanded a lot of emotional energy, but this day felt different. I couldn't shake the overwhelming fatigue that clung to me. Even after dinner with my family, where I tried to keep up appearances, I felt disconnected, like something was off. Ethan noticed it too and suggested I get some rest early, but I just couldn't bring myself to do it. Instead, I climbed into bed, hoping sleep would restore my energy. Little did I know, sleep would be the beginning of something far more profound. As I lay there, my body felt heavier than usual, and my mind drifted into a deep, heavy state of fatigue. It wasn't like falling asleep, it was more like slipping into a void where everything around me seemed to dissolve. I tried to shake off the sensation, but no matter how hard I tried to stay awake, the feeling of complete exhaustion took over. The room grew silent, and my surroundings faded away. I felt my body growing colder, like I was no longer in control of it. I could feel my chest rising and falling with shallow breaths, but it was as if I was already detaching from myself. I didn't understand what was happening, but I could sense that something beyond my comprehension was unfolding. Then it hit me, the sensation of being pulled away from my body, like a force beyond my control, was lifting me out. I could still feel the bed beneath me, but it was like I was no longer physically tethered to it. It was as if my consciousness had separated from my physical form. A part of me wanted to resist, to fight against it, but the pull was too strong. I couldn't hold on to the world around me, and the more I tried to stay present, the further away it felt. I was helpless, completely detached from everything I knew. It wasn't a feeling of fear, but one of complete surrender, like my body was being guided somewhere I wasn't prepared to go. The silence in the room grew deeper, more suffocating, as if everything had been paused. I couldn't hear my heartbeat, my breath, or any of the usual nighttime sounds. There was nothing but silence, and in that silence, I realized I wasn't just falling asleep. Something more profound was happening. I tried to move, to speak, to call out to Ethan, but no words came. I was no longer sure what was real and what wasn't. All I knew was that I was no longer fully in my body, and there was a deep sense of stillness surrounding me. The separation felt strange, but it also felt inevitable, like a moment of fate I had no control over. As I continued to slip further away from the physical world, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. It wasn't the kind of peace I had known before. No, this was something entirely different. It was as though the very fabric of my being was being enveloped by a calm, soothing energy. There was no fear, no anxiety, just an undeniable stillness that seemed to stretch on forever. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly at rest. It was like I had been floating, weightless, in an eternal embrace. But even in that calm, something inside me knew that this wasn't just a dream or a random moment of exhaustion. Something far greater was at play, and it was about to change everything. I had no idea what was coming next, but as I floated in that strange liminal space, I began to realize that this was the beginning of something significant. It wasn't just the end of a long day or a temporary escape from my worries. This was an experience that would alter the way I saw everything, the way I saw myself, my faith, and my life. The detachment from my body, the deep silence, and the profound peace were all signs that something beyond my understanding was happening. I could feel it deep within my soul. This was no ordinary moment, and whatever awaited me next, I would never be the same again. As the sensations of detachment and peace continued, I knew I was on the edge of a threshold, a place between life and something else. I wasn't sure where I was going or what awaited me, but I understood that whatever it was, it held the answers to things I had been questioning for so long. I couldn't see the future, but I could feel the presence of something powerful, something life-changing. I let go, surrendering fully to whatever this moment was meant to be. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't confused. I was simply there, suspended between the physical world and something far beyond it. I didn't know what was waiting for me, but I was ready to face it. I don't know how to explain it, but the moment I found myself in his presence, everything else faded. There was no more confusion, no more fear, just an overwhelming sense of peace. It wasn't like anything I had ever felt before. Jesus was standing before me, and it felt as if I had known him my entire life, even though I had never seen him like this. His gaze was filled with such power and love that I felt like he could see every part of me, every secret I had buried deep inside. It wasn't a judgmental look, it wasn't harsh or condemning. It was filled with compassion, but it also held something more profound, a truth that could no longer be ignored. I had always believed that I knew what love was, but this was different. His love was not the kind of love I had known on earth. It was pure, powerful, and transformative. I could feel it surrounding me, wrapping me in a sense of safety and comfort, but also making me face the reality of my own heart. It was as if in his presence there was nowhere to hide. I couldn't escape, not from my thoughts, my actions, or the person I had been. I could feel him looking straight through me, like he knew every hidden corner of my soul. And then it started. Jesus began to show me moments from my life, little flashes of memories like scenes from a movie. At first they were random, insignificant moments, like moments when I was laughing with my children, sharing a meal with Ethan. But then everything shifted. One moment became crystal clear, a memory I had pushed away for years. I saw myself alone in the quiet of the night, giving in to temptation, telling myself that it didn't matter. I saw myself justifying it, telling myself it was harmless, something private, something I could control. But in that moment, standing before Jesus, I could see it for what it truly was. It wasn't harmless. It was an open door, one that had allowed the enemy to invade my life in ways I never understood. The shock hit me like a punch to the gut. All these years I had convinced myself that masturbation was a private, inconsequential act, something that didn't affect anyone, including my relationship with God. But now, as I stood before Jesus, the truth was undeniable. Every time I gave in, I was weakening my relationship with God. Every time I justified it, I was opening a door for the enemy to attack me spiritually. I had been blind to it, unable to see how deeply this secret sin was affecting me. What I thought was harmless was actually causing distance between me and the God I loved, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. It wasn't just the act itself, it was what it represented. Each time I indulged, I was choosing something that wasn't aligned with God's will for my life. I could see it now. It wasn't a small thing, a minor flaw that could be overlooked. It was a choice to rebel against what I knew to be true, a choice that allowed spiritual darkness to seep into my life. Jesus didn't condemn me. He didn't scold me for my actions, but the weight of the truth was overwhelming. It was like I had been living in a fog, unable to see clearly, and now everything was in sharp focus. The realization that my sin had affected my relationship with God, that it had created a gap between us, was almost too much to bear. As he continued to show me the truth, I felt the flood of emotions rush through me. I was ashamed, yes, but more than that, I was heartbroken. I had thought I was living a righteous life, that my faith was strong, and that I was honoring God in everything I did. But now I saw how my hidden sin had been quietly undermining that. It was like a slow, creeping poison, affecting not just my relationship with God, but also my ability to be fully present in my life. How many times had I allowed myself to hide behind excuses, to justify my actions, only to push God further away? And yet, even as the weight of this realization crashed over me, I felt his love. It wasn't the love I had expected. It wasn't the "I'm okay with your mistakes" kind of love. It was a love that held me accountable, that showed me the truth, but didn't leave me there. Jesus didn't leave me in my shame. He didn't turn his back on me for what I had done. Instead, he offered me something I never thought possible: freedom. He didn't just point out the problem and walk away. He gave me a way out, a chance to make things right. The love in his gaze didn't make me feel condemned. It made me feel seen, understood, and offered the opportunity to change. His love didn't cover up my sin or pretend it wasn't there. It was a love that confronted me with the truth, but also extended grace, telling me I didn't have to keep living this way. I didn't have to stay trapped in the guilt and shame. I could be free from this hidden burden I had carried for so long. His love wasn't a free pass to keep sinning, but an invitation to experience true healing and transformation. At that moment I understood. The enemy had used my sin to create a wedge between me and God, to keep me isolated and ashamed. But Jesus was offering me something better: restoration. I didn't have to keep running away from the truth. I didn't have to hide anymore. The truth had been revealed, and now I had a choice. I could stay in my sin, continue justifying it, or I could choose freedom, healing, and a deeper relationship with God. The shock of seeing my sin for what it really was hard to bear, but I also felt something I had never experienced before, and that was hope. There was a way out. I didn't have to keep living in the darkness. I didn't have to be ruled by this secret any longer. And that in itself was a revelation more powerful than anything I could have imagined. Jesus had shown me the truth, not to condemn me, but to set me free. As Jesus continued to speak to me, the weight of his words sank in deeper. He didn't just show me the sin itself. He revealed the deeper spiritual impact it had on my life. I had always believed that masturbation was just a personal act, something that didn't affect my relationship with God or my spiritual life. But as Jesus spoke, I began to see things I had never even considered. The act, while private, wasn't isolated. It was a doorway, a spiritual opening that allowed the enemy to attack me in ways I couldn't understand. Every time I indulged in it, I was unknowingly inviting darkness into my life. The more I gave in, the weaker my connection to God became. I felt like I had been slowly drifting away, but I had never realized the true reason until now. The consequences were far more severe than I had ever imagined. In that moment, I saw how the enemy had used my sin against me, making a legal case before God. I didn't fully understand it at first, but Jesus explained that every sin, no matter how small it seemed, created a legal claim the enemy could use to accuse me. It wasn't just about what I had done. It was about how my actions gave the enemy grounds to attack my spirit. I felt exposed, completely vulnerable, as if every hidden part of me had been laid bare before God. The guilt I had felt before now felt much more real, much more serious. This wasn't just a small mistake or a weakness. It was something that had affected my spiritual life, opening doors for lies, deceit, and fear to creep in. The enemy had used this sin as a foothold to weaken me, to keep me in shame and guilt, and I had no idea I was allowing it. The realization hit me like a tidal wave. My sin wasn't just a physical action, it was a spiritual choice. Each time I indulged, I was making a decision to distance myself from God. I thought I was just fulfilling a private desire, but now I saw how that desire was linked to something far more dangerous. It was a choice to step away from the closeness I once had with God, a choice that opened the door for spiritual attack. Every time I gave in, I was choosing to ignore the intimacy I could have with Him, and instead, I was welcoming separation. I had been so blind to the truth of it all. I had been so focused on the physical aspect, thinking that it was harmless, that I failed to see the spiritual consequences. The guilt I felt now was more than just shame. It was a recognition of the damage I had caused, not just to myself, but to my relationship with God. I had created a chasm between us, one that had been growing over time. The more I justified my actions, the further I had moved away from the love and peace I once experienced in His presence. Jesus showed me how this sin had been slowly eroding my spiritual health. It wasn't a quick destruction, but a gradual fading away from the connection I had cherished. And now, standing before Him, I realized that this was no small matter. It wasn't just about breaking a rule or falling into temptation. It was about the damage it had done to my spirit. I felt ashamed, so ashamed that I had let this sin control me for so long without realizing the depth of its consequences. I was exposed, fully aware of how my actions had affected my walk with God. But as I stood there, feeling small and vulnerable, I also felt His presence. Jesus didn't turn away from me. He didn't condemn me or reject me for what I had done. Instead, He showed me the way out. He didn't just reveal the damage caused by my sin. He also showed me that there was a path to healing, a path to restoration. The enemy had used my guilt and shame as weapons, but Jesus was offering me the opportunity to break free from it all. What struck me the most was the idea that this sin had allowed the enemy to attack me spiritually. The more I gave in, the more I let the enemy have power over me. It was like I had been giving him permission to control my thoughts, my emotions, and my relationship with God. I had been walking in spiritual darkness without even knowing it. The enemy used my sin to keep me in bondage, to make me feel unworthy of God's love and forgiveness. But now I saw that I didn't have to stay in that place. I didn't have to keep giving the enemy power over my life. Jesus had shown me the truth, and that truth was the key to my freedom. I had a choice. I could keep hiding, keep justifying my actions, and continue to let the enemy have control. Or I could face the truth, accept God's grace, and choose to break free from the cycle I had been living in. The decision was mine, and for the first time I realized that I had the power to change. It wasn't going to be easy, but I knew that the spiritual consequences of continuing down this path would only lead to further distance from God. I didn't want that. I didn't want to keep living in the shadow of shame and guilt. I wanted to step into the light, to embrace the freedom that Jesus was offering. As I stood there, completely exposed, with everything laid bare before Jesus, I expected condemnation. I had spent so much time hiding, convincing myself that my sin was too much for God to forgive. I had believed that my mistakes, the shame I had carried for so long, would be too great to overcome. But as I stood there in His presence, I realized something that changed everything. Jesus didn't condemn me. He didn't turn His back on me. Instead, He looked at me with compassion, His eyes filled with love and understanding, and He said something that struck me deeply. You don't have to live like this anymore. His words weren't harsh or judgmental. They weren't filled with anger or disappointment. They were filled with grace, the grace that I didn't deserve but desperately needed. I had always believed that my sin had separated me too far from God, that there was no way back. But Jesus, in His infinite mercy, was offering me something I had never fully grasped before. Freedom. Freedom from the guilt, the shame, and the cycle of sin that had controlled my life for so long. In that moment, I understood that Jesus wasn't just pointing out my mistakes. He was offering me a chance to start over, a chance to walk a new path. I had spent so much of my life hiding behind excuses, justifying my actions, convincing myself that it didn't matter. But Jesus was showing me that it did matter. Every choice, every action, even the ones I thought were private, had a profound impact on my relationship with Him. And yet, despite all the damage I had done, He was offering me forgiveness. True forgiveness, not the kind I had tried to offer myself, but the kind that comes from Him alone. He wasn't asking me to be perfect or to fix everything on my own. He was inviting me to lay down my burdens and allow Him to heal me. The weight of my mistakes, my guilt, my shame began to lift. It wasn't instant, but as Jesus spoke to me, I felt something inside me shift. The emotional pain, the regret, and the constant battle with guilt began to fade, replaced by a sense of peace I had never known before. Jesus wasn't asking me to ignore the truth of what I had done. He wasn't saying that my sin didn't matter. What He was offering was something far greater, the opportunity to be free from it. The chance to let go of the shame that had kept me bound for so long. He was giving me the power to choose a new path. It was in that moment that I realized how much Jesus truly understood me. He saw my weaknesses, my flaws, my mistakes, but He didn't condemn me for them. Instead, He extended His hand, offering me forgiveness, healing, and redemption. He didn't just want me to acknowledge my sin. He wanted me to walk away from it. He wanted me to choose freedom, to leave behind the lies that had kept me trapped, and to embrace the truth that He had made a way for me to be free. I felt like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders, but I also felt a deep responsibility. Jesus had shown me the way out, but now it was up to me to choose it. He had given me the gift of freedom, but it was still my choice whether to accept it. For so long I had lived in the shadows, hiding my sin and my shame. But now, standing before Jesus, I was faced with a decision. Would I continue to live in the darkness, or would I step into the light of redemption? I knew that I couldn't go back to the way things were. I couldn't keep hiding. It was time to face the truth, to confront my past, and to walk toward healing. The decision to change wasn't easy. I had built my life around the belief that my sin was something I could control, something I could keep hidden. But Jesus had shown me that it wasn't just a small issue. It was a spiritual battle that I had been fighting alone for too long. He was offering me more than just forgiveness. He was offering me the chance to heal, to rebuild my relationship with God, and to break free from the chains that had held me captive. It wasn't going to be simple or quick, but I knew that with His help, I could walk the path of redemption. I made the choice. I chose to face the truth, to stop hiding, and to embrace the freedom that Jesus was offering. I knew that my past didn't have to define me, that my mistakes didn't have to control my future. The power of forgiveness was more than just a moment of relief. It was a transformative experience that changed everything about how I saw myself, my faith, and my relationship with God. I wasn't perfect, and I wasn't free from all the consequences of my actions, but I was free from the shame and guilt that had kept me in bondage. And that in itself was the beginning of my redemption. As I began to walk toward healing, I knew that I had a responsibility to share this message with others. There are so many people out there who are carrying the same burdens I had, people who think they are beyond redemption, beyond hope. I couldn't keep this freedom to myself. I had to share it, to tell others that there is a way out, that no matter how deep their shame, they don't have to stay trapped in it. Jesus had shown me the way, and I wanted others to experience that same freedom, that same grace, and that same love. As I reflect on the journey I've been on, I want to encourage anyone who is watching this to stop hiding, to stop living in the shadows of shame and guilt. Your past doesn't have to define you, and your mistakes don't have to control your future. You have a choice just as I did. You can choose redemption. You can choose freedom. The truth is, Jesus is offering it to you right now. All you have to do is accept it. You don't have to carry the weight of your sins any longer. The path to healing and peace is before you. Step into the light of redemption and experience the freedom that comes with it. The journey won't be easy, but it will be worth it. And I promise you, once you step into that freedom, you will never look back. It's time to live the life you were meant to live, free from the weight of your past and filled with the love and grace of Jesus.